You want a better credit score? What can you do? Jim.
Well, first off, understand what your credit score is and understand why it is what it is.
Okay, Mike.
For most people, just stop charging.
Makes sense. Talking to experts about staying out of debt, what to do if you're in debt, and how to avoid all the debt relief scams. I'm Joe Ducey with the Better Business Bureau. This is Joe Knows Better. All right, we're talking about everybody's favorite topic, how to avoid credit issues. And what do you do if you've got credit problems right now? I'm with Mike Sullivan, personal financial consultant with Take Charge America. It's a nonprofit and BBB accredited. Jim Triggs, president and CEO of Money Management International, also nonprofit and BBB accredited. Guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
This is a big topic. I guess, first of all, I think probably most people listening right now are seeing this, are in some kind of credit trouble and want to get out of it. What would you tell people? First of all, Jim, let me ask you, what would you tell people who have, it probably depends on how much they're in and what their patterns are, but what would you tell people to do who are, say, I don't know, what the typical is, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in debt?
Understand how much in debt you are, what your interest rates are, and what your plan is to pay it off. And once you can do that, then you can look at your living expenses as well and look at your income and determine how much money you have every month left over to pay towards your balances. If you're only paying minimum payments on your credit cards, that's where the problem comes in, because it could take, with a large credit card balance, it could take 25, 30 years to pay it off with just minimum payments. So if you're in debt, you need to figure out how much you owe, what extra you can pay to pay it down as fast as possible.
People don't want to hear that. You know that. People want to hear, hey, I take this pill. Do this thing.
Yeah,
is there a thing you can do?
Unfortunately, you can't borrow your way out
a level
of debt.
to press
you
or
can't
turn?
borrow your way out of debt. That's one issue people try to do, and just moving it around because of interest rates or what have you.
So you're talking getting in specifics and like setting up a budget, knowing exactly. I think a lot of people probably don't do that. They've got this money going out, they don't know how much is coming in and all this.
That's one of the keys, and you can do it yourself. If you understand what's coming in and what's going out and what you could pay extra towards it, then you can make extra payments than just the minimum payments to tackle the debt faster. And another way to do it is pay off the highest interest first, and then you'll see that you're just paying less and less in interest, and you can pay it off much quicker. Problem comes in when you don't have extra money to pay towards your debt.
Yeah, that's I think going to be it. All right, Mike, what would you do if you've got 20, 30,000? I don't know if that's typical, 40,000, a lot of credit card debt. What do you do at that point?
It's very typical. Well, first of all, you recognize that you're in serious trouble if you owe that much money, because if you're not prepared to take serious action, then there's no point in doing anything. You're going to crash. And when I say do something, it means changing a behavior. I think the toughest part for a lot of people is to say, I'm here because I did something that wasn't good.
Yeah.
I've got to change or it's not going to get any better. And that's very difficult. If you've got habits over 20 years of living a certain way, and all of a sudden you say, I can't afford to live that way, that's really, really hard. What
are the big factors in determining a credit score? Everybody looks at the score, not the report, but their score. And they want that, 700, 800, whatever it is. What are the big factors that determine what that credit score is?
Well, the two biggest ones. First one is, do you pay your bills on time? And the second one is, how much do you owe compared to how much you could owe, what we call utilization.
Okay.
Those two make up 2/3 of it. So if you, A, have a lot of credit but don't use very much of it, and B, make sure that every payment is made on time every month, you're probably going to have a pretty decent credit score.
What do you think, Jim? What would you add to that?
I don't know that I would add much more than that. Those are the two biggest factors. If you're paying on time and then your total indebtedness.
So there is something to be said about having credit, having credit cards even, right? I mean, because I think people look and say, oh, man, the credit cards, they're the problem. I mean, of course, they're getting people what they want at the time, right? But the percentage rates kind of keeping up with them. But if you have what? So you're saying if you have maybe a $6,000, $7,000 limit, and you're using 1,000 of that each month and paying it off,
you'd be in good shape.
That's what you need to do.
Keeping it, usually the kind of status quo is keep it under 30%. Obviously, you want to be even under that if you can.
30% from?
30% of your total available balances when you add up all of your unsecured credit cards. Keep it under 30%, as under as you can, the better your score is going to be.
Mike, how would you say credit cards aren't the enemy, would you say?
No.
Okay.
Using credit cards is the enemy. There's nothing wrong with credit cards. I think everybody should have one or two and not use them.
Okay. And not use them.
Well,
just because you have that, so you have that available credit.
Yeah, that helps. And I will admit that, unfortunately, this is a day and age where if you don't have a credit card, it's difficult to buy things. It's difficult to get almost anything that you might want. I admit that there are problems with debit cards, for example. There's some security issues and other things. So I don't say to people, never use a credit card. use a credit card only when you have to, and make sure you can pay it off. Put the cash aside every time you use it. At the end of the month, at the latest, pay it off.
Okay. So, and you would say use it responsibly. And I know more and more companies are offering points and things for it, so you can also accumulate those for airlines and things, right? Have you seen that work for people, or has that been a lure for people who can't control?
Yeah, it's about discipline and your ability to repay.
Yeah.
Running all of your finances that you can through some sort of points card, especially if you have the ability to just pay that off at the end of every month, and the discipline to do that, it benefits you because you're getting value for those points, and there's a monetary value with those points. But if you're someone who has a lot of debt and struggles to make minimum payments or struggles to make payments, I wouldn't recommend doing that, because then you're not able to pay it off every month, and it's just going to be more debt that you have, and that's going to the interest rates and any sort of other issues you have outweigh any sort of benefits from the points.
And I don't really like points. It's like the commercials you see on TV where somebody says, let me get that, I get points. I think they encourage you actually to spend more money. I don't have anything against cash back, however. And I think that if you have, in fact, decent credit, you should get a 2% cash back card. So you get that back, and you should take it every month and use it to pay off debt. So, in fact, there's probably no reason not to have a cash back card. There's a reason not to have a point card, because it might encourage you to spend more because, well, gee, if I spend another $10,000, I'm going to get 2 weeks in Disneyland. I've seen people do that, and I don't like that. So I'm a little concerned about those folks.
All right. I want to ask you general questions, and I know that you're going to say it depends on a lot of things, who the person is, how much they make, how they spend. But I'd kind of like to know, if somebody's got a car loan and 2 or 3 credit cards and they owe balances on all those cards, are they looking at trouble if they're not paying them off every month, or they're only making minimum payments? Do they maybe not see that yet, where they're being called by creditors? Can people foresee this happening? And is there a way to see in their profile that, man, you're on a bad track here?
Well, I think the number one thing is, are you making those payments, and are they? Do you have the ability to make them?
How hard is it to make them?
Right. Yeah, and are you paying more than minimum?
And why? Because the minimum, what? They add up the interest.
Yeah, interest accumulates and keeps accumulating, and paying just minimums on credit cards extends those credit cards for years and years and years, and you pay so much in interest, especially where interest rates are now. So if you're not able to make extra payments to your credit cards, you're just making minimum payments, you are an issue or a life event away from trouble.
How do you go ahead?
I was going to say, I think you can be even more, and he's certainly right, visual about that, and tell people if you get a 20% credit card, APR credit card, which is pretty reasonable these days, that means every time you use that and you're not paying it off, you're just making the minimum payment, every year you're paying 20% more for everything than you would if you didn't have that debt.
Okay.
So it just lowers your standard of living. And I keep saying to people, every time you go out and buy a dinner, or you go out and you spend $20, it's costing you $24.
Yeah.
So you got to stop that, or you're not going to get as many dinners.
What do you see as an average? I'm going to maybe you'll say there isn't one, but as an average person that comes into your place, what are they facing?
We're seeing consumers nowadays, right now, we're seeing an average interest rate of around 21% or so, and average debt load of around $26,000. And this is just credit card debt, not counting cars or personal loans or mortgages.
And do people who have this credit card debt typically have those other things too?
Yes.
Okay, so they could be in debt how much? 50?
Well, I mean, hundreds of thousands if you count their house.
Okay.
But you throw their car in there, and with the price of cars now, let's say $40,000 plus the credit card debt, they could be without their house. They could be looking at $78,000 in credit card debt.
Okay,
and a few thousand more in student loans too.
Yeah.
Student loans. Yeah. Also, so you're looking at $75,000 in debt. Some of these people.
Yeah.
And now are these people who are they coming to you because now they can't make their payments and they got into a position where they're being called for this, and what are they facing?
That's usually the issue. Is they're either getting collection calls, or they're referred to us by a creditor who knows that we can help them with their overall issue. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
But usually they're facing some sort of crisis situation to pick up the phone and call a credit counseling agency.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the worst problem. Is usually by the time they call, they're in such serious trouble that a third of them can't really be helped. They've waited too long, and they're going to end up default, bankruptcy, whatever. So that is the problem. They wait too long. They wait till there's a crisis.
I'm going to talk about bankruptcy in a minute, but let's talk about what your nonprofits can do. Mike with Take Charge America. Somebody comes to you. What can you do for them? What's a typical, agenda? What do you do?
Well, the first thing is just analyzing the situation. You do an analysis and say, can you afford the debt that you have? Are you ever going to be able to pay this off? So we build a budget basically for them, and we say, yeah, with some concessions from the creditors, and if you're willing to cut back on this and that, you can do it.
Go ahead.
Or we say you can't.
Or can you get do you help get concessions from the creditors going?
Yes.
Absolutely.
You do?
Yes.
That's probably the main value, I would say, for nonprofit credit counseling. I wouldn't say the main value, but certainly a significant value is the creditors will permit us on their behalf to make real concessions. Interest rates.
What do you see? Same thing with you, Jim.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Some creditors will waive interest to 0% if you're paying off through a nonprofit debt management plan. It really is, some of it's consumer specific based on their hardship, but our average interest rate for consumers paying their debt off through us, their credit cards, is 6%.
6%.
Yes.
So they come to you with maybe 20, 25% on their cards, and you can get it down to 0% if they're all right. Now, what does that mean they have to do? They have to make the payment every.
They
consumer.
Make one payment to us every month. We disperse that to their creditors. The cards have to be closed at the time the program is set up, because creditors aren't going to reduce interest, reduce your payment, stop late charges, all those things if you're still charging, right?
Okay.
The whole goal is to get you out of debt within 5 years or less. So every major creditor that we work with across the country provides consumers concessions if they're on a debt management plan through a nonprofit.
Right. So you have to pay you guys that for doing that. So you get the lower interest rate, so they're not paying the interest. They're still paying the balance, though, correct, of the amount. Do you ever get that down? Is there a way that happens where that balance goes from 7,000 to 3, or no?
Not balance reduction on a credit card. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't, unless you have a different experience.
We do. Yeah, we have less than full balance products with probably 7 of the top 10 creditors in the country.
Okay.
Where we have prearranged agreements with them to settle debt at a certain percentage, and over a certain time. So there are specific creditors once the delinquency status hits a certain point where we can use those less than full balance products.
What does that delinquency status typically have to be before you can get concessions from a credit card company? Either way.
I don't know that there's a strict rule on even being delinquent.
Yeah.
I'm not aware that I'm sure that each of the credit card companies has a standard of some kind or another, but I'm not aware of anything.
It doesn't have to be you have to be 50,000 in debt. You have to owe this much money. It is.
No, I mean they have a standard that says you need help.
Yeah.
You have to be in a situation where you need help, but again, each one has a slightly different standard than that, and I can't say that I prefer, of course, when people aren't in default or certainly not 60 days or even 30 days late. But
well, for the debt management plan, consumers can be current. We just show the creditors that they're either barely getting by every month or just making minimum payments, and something's going to happen. So they're happy to help them out.
So they have to
for the less than full balance options, for us to get those from the creditors, there has to be delinquency.
Okay, so delinquency and just showing that they're hard. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I wasn't going to say
that they're hard. It's going to be hard for them to make these payments. It's harder and harder because of their income.
Well, for less than full balance, where they're giving up a portion of their principal, it's more showing them they can't do a debt management plan to help them. It's either going to be this, or they're going to file bankruptcy or do nothing, or end up at a debt settlement company.
The credit card companies would rather that they get paid than not get paid through bankruptcy and those things.
That's a theory.
That's a theory. So now, but this isn't just a freebie for people to come in and say, "Hey, I'm going to come to you." And what discipline do these people have to do? And they have to keep up with these payments. If they don't, what happens? I mean, what kind of
get bumped off?
Okay.
You're off the program.
Okay.
If you can't maintain, I mean, most creditors will say, "Okay, you were a little late, or you missed one, or something," over the 4 or 5 year period. But you certainly can't just ignore it and say, "I'm going to pay it whenever I want to," and expect to keep getting those concessions.
Okay. Same with you?
Yeah, and 98% or more of the consumers that are on a debt management plan are set up on ACH. And our disbursement rates are over 97%. So that means we only have like a 3% late rate every month. So because we're finding the right consumers and working it into their budget and putting it on an ACH draft, it's kind of a set it. I won't say set it and forget it, but it's almost a set it and forget it, and they pay. They continue to pay unless something happens.
People may say, I don't know if I'm at that point right now, but would you say contact us anyway, just to see where you are on? I mean, if you're having problems paying, then you might be. I would guess you'd want people to come earlier than later.
I do. I always say to people, like when I do classes and things, I always say, if you have any doubt at all or you think you might be in trouble, call. It doesn't cost anything.
Okay.
The phone call's free. Call and talk to a counselor.
Okay. And
Calls and consultations are completely free. And even if a debt management plan isn't for you, the counselor will help coach you on ways that you can either pay off your debt on your own or find ways to save money, those sorts of
Okay,
those
so
sorts
you
of
have
things.
free ways of helping people with budgets, and
Right.
correct?
Most of the counseling that both of us do is free, whether it's
Right.
housing related or debt and
Okay.
budget related.
And then if they do decide to go with a debt management program, there's a fee for that.
Right.
It can
Correct?
be, yeah.
Like a percentage fee.
Yeah, it's
whatever.
not a percentage. I can tell
it's
you
flat.
our fee structure, and it's a maximum of $59 a month.
Okay.
But it depends on state and client situation because they're governed by states.
Okay.
Even though it's a max $59 a month, our average fee is $23.50, $23.50 a month because we do waive fees based on hardship.
Okay.
And we have a setup fee of max $75 just one time.
Okay.
But the average is about $30 because we waive those too, and also based on the state the consumers live in.
Okay. Mike, I don't know
That's
what the
pretty
fees-
typical. Yeah, it's a state-by-state thing.
Okay. Now, you're talking about credit improvement. That's to improve your credit. And I think from there, you would go then to, you probably try to keep these people to set up budgets and to do things a different way. Correct?
Well, we set up budgets with them on the initial consultation.
So that's all part of the debt management. And not
Yeah,
only
and-
are you lowering what they have to pay, but you're keeping them on a path so they don't face these things.
We try to. We both of us and most agencies like us send the consumer an action plan
Yeah.
after the counseling session, and that action plan will cover anything that was discussed by the counselor or coach. Also, we'll give them referrals or nonprofit referrals in their area specifically if they need them.
Are there ratios if somebody wants to buy or for housing? They talk about a certain percentage of your income should go to housing. Do you have percentages that you think or you recommend? What would that be, Mike?
Well, I'm sorry. We have, I shouldn't say we have percentages we recommend, but there are percentages like the 30% housing.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do that.
30%. You
housing.
think no more than that probably? I mean, or is this
Personally or the company?
Yeah.
I think we still kind of refer to the traditional 30, 20% transportation, et cetera. But in reality, I mean, every budget is individual.
Yeah.
It's like debt service. You know, debt service, most of these formulas say should be 10%. Well, if you start out and your debt service is 15,
debt service meaning
paying off your credit cards,
Okay.
et cetera. So what are you going to do about it?
so that part of your income going towards that.
Right.
Got it.
So I think the guidelines, I don't like that people get hung up on these guidelines. You
Okay.
got to build an individual budget for every consumer. You got to recognize they got fixed costs. You're probably, are you going to lower your rent? If so, you're going to move.
Yeah.
You're going to lower your car cost? You're going to sell your car. So you got to build an individual budget, not get too hung up on the fact that you're spending more on housing or transportation than somebody else.
Okay.
Maybe you live in California.
You're going to be paying more.
Every situation is different. So
All right.
the
And
formula
here for a
part
while.
never isn't. I don't think is all that critical.
Same or we can move on?
I think I would just add, don't just because you were pre-approved for a certain amount
Yeah.
on your mortgage, don't assume you can afford it in your lifestyle.
Okay.
So make sure you sit down and figure out what it's really going to cost you.
Yeah, that's
Where your
the
money's
dang-
really going? How much?
That's
you're
the
making.
danger with these things. I think you're right. People tend to spend up instead of down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just because
Well, yeah,
the
as
mortgage
often
company
as they
said you
can.
can pay $700,000 for a house, it doesn't necessarily mean
Yeah.
you can.
I went
Or
over a
get to
couple of
the
these things.
car.
These are complaints to the BBB Scam Tracker, which I think is for anybody out there. It's a great place to go. BBB.org. Look for Scam Tracker and see the various scams that are out here involving all these industries before you get involved with them to protect yourself. But this is the credit repair. You guys are credit improvement, correct?
Credit counseling, really.
Credit counseling. All right. These are considered credit repair, debt relief things. Where these companies have come up and said that they can take care of it like this. Is that what you hear sometimes from clients? Are they telling you that they've gone to a place? What are the promises, and what do you believe? What would you say to people who believe those?
Consumers are getting very smart and shopping for
Yeah.
their potential options at this point. And we talk to a lot of people who talk to debt settlement companies
Yeah.
or other companies outside
That
of the
promise-
nonprofit that promise they'll reduce their debt by 50% or more, and the creditors will stop calling, and it's your God-given right not to pay back all your debt, like those commercials and such.
Yeah.
And that I would avoid those sorts of things.
Okay.
Right.
'Cause they're-
Or if anybody says, I can improve your credit score 100 points this month.
Yeah.
No, they can't do that. Not legally.
I read you a couple of those things. I think you said one was the company promised to help get me out of debt. They charged me a monthly fee that was supposed to go at the end. Instead, they took my money and nothing was done for my debt. So now I will owe my debt and additional several $1,000s. Is that typical of what if you hire?
It sounds like debt settlement
Yeah.
to me. And the reason it sounds like debt settlement is Debt settlement has you make a monthly payment to them, and they pull that money in an account for you.
Okay.
And then as you're delinquent or you charge off, your debt charges off, which means that the creditor wrote it off, then they reach out to those creditors for a settlement. And once they get an approved settlement from the creditor, they can take their fee. Those fees are usually 25% of the balance. I know I'm getting very technical.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, but
Yeah.
they pull that fee from the money you pulled immediately and then make one payment to the creditor. So it sounds like that consumer didn't understand the details of what they were getting involved in, which are probably covered in the fine print.
Okay.
But they sent this money for these number of months, and all of a sudden it's all gone. It went to the company, and they're saying you didn't do anything for me.
Okay.
Because they just made one payment to the creditor at that point.
Okay. So it's these promises that they can't live up to. In a
It's-
lot of cases,
it's-
luring you in with, we're going to do
It's
this.
a
we're gonna do this.
misunderstanding of the solution, I believe, and the payment and the fee structure.
So are there some out and out scams here and some companies that are just doing things but making promises they can't really, I mean, are there some legitimate companies that are doing this that, but I guess sometimes with businesses, I wonder if it's a total out and out scam or if it's a business doing things wrong.
That settlement
Yeah.
in many situations is legal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't call it illegitimate.
Yeah.
And
Unless they're just not doing anything and they are total out.
right, there are probably
Yeah.
some companies
Yeah.
that are illegitimate. The industry,
Yeah.
I may not like, and I may not think overall that their success rate warrants the risk and the cost, but I wouldn't say it's illegitimate. It is something I seldom recommend.
Okay.
The part of the population that can benefit from debt settlement, and because I get this a lot, is people who are about to file for Chapter 13 bankruptcy anyway and have nothing to lose.
Okay. All right. Let's go into bankruptcy. Yeah. What point do people, I think people who don't know, slightly in debt, they're not sure whether they can file for bankruptcy. And is it always given a bankruptcy? Say you're $5,000. I mean, what would you tell people about bankruptcy?
Well,
Jim?
the bankruptcy laws changed back in 2005, and it became harder for consumers just to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which basically would discharge their unsecured debt if they qualified and went through the whole process. When the laws changed, there's a means test now, and consumers, if they can't qualify for a Chapter 7 based on that means test, meaning how much you owe, how much you earn, then you have to be pushed into a Chapter 13 where you make payments for years potentially. So
with 0%?
It's probably 0% because most likely the accounts are charged off at that point.
But now it's a federal thing. Now it's a
and so you're going to pay a portion of that debt back, whatever the trustees and the bankruptcy courts agree upon. We look at bankruptcy as a last resort, absolute last resort, and we only recommend debt settlement to avoid bankruptcy, like this gentleman
Same with you?
said.
Yeah, bankruptcy should be the last resort. Not to say that nobody should. I have recommended it to people. If there's no way that you're going to legitimately pay off your debt, I tell people go talk to an attorney. The attorney's probably going to say bankruptcy. It is, as Jim said, not pleasant. The means test for Chapter 7, which is what I call the good bankruptcy, you get out of debt, is tough. And a lot of people that earn so little that they qualify never qualified for enough debt to get that forgiven. So you qualify for Chapter 7 and your credit's ruined for life and they wrote off $6,000.
Yeah.
So is that worth it?
Yeah. Well, let's get into – go ahead.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
When I say we recommend settlement for consumers to avoid bankruptcy, we don't necessarily recommend a settlement company. If you have the wherewithal to just do it yourself. If you know your debt is charged off, all you have to do is pick up the phone, call your creditor, tell them your situation, and most creditors will work out a settlement with you on your own, and you don't have to pay anybody for that.
You don't have to pay anybody for it. Okay. All right. So, guys, let me ask you a question about how you stay out of debt. We talked about being in debt. What would you advise people to do who don't want to get to that point? Jim?
Don't overspend. I mean, don't understand what if you use a credit card for a payment, have a plan to pay it off as fast as possible. The first month, obviously, would be best. Okay. So stay out of debt. Don't overspend. Live within your means. If you don't have the cash for it, don't buy it now. Save up for it.
Okay, Mike.
I think I'd just say the same thing in slightly different words. That if you never spend more than you earn, you're never going to be in trouble. If you're already spending more than you earn, your only option is spend less.
Okay. All right. And setting up a budget is crucial, right? Knowing how much money you have in, how much can come in, how much. Do you recommend always making sure some amount of money goes into savings?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, especially now when
is there
you're
a
getting
percentage you think about, or
whatever you can afford, whatever you can put in there. Especially now when the high yield savings accounts are everywhere, and you can be getting 4 to 5% on your savings.
Yeah, we're dealing with people, of course, that don't have a lot of money, and sometimes they'll say to us, we say we got to put this into savings. I can't put anything into savings because of my debt. And I know we say, no, you have to. You have to start having emergency savings or you're going to keep charging. Because what else do you do when you have an emergency? So, yes, you've got to save something, even if it's just a little bit.
Okay. All right, guys. I really appreciate you being here. I think we educated a lot of people. Jim Triggs, President and CEO of Money Management International, a nonprofit BB accredited. That's moneymanagement.org.
Yes.
Moneymanagement.org. And you say there's some free service you'll provide for people.
Absolutely. All of our debt and budget consultations are completely free. Any sort of housing counseling is completely free.
All right. And Mike Sullivan, personal financial consultant with Take Charge America, nonprofit, BB accredited, and same thing.
Same thing.
So free, get in touch with you if they think they might have an issue.
Sure. Be more than happy to, again, provide free counseling to anybody that thinks they have financial challenges.
And that's takechargeamerica.org.
Yeah. And I would say, even if they're not calling us, call somebody. If you're in trouble, please talk to somebody. Get a money coach. Talk to somebody at your HR department at work. Talk to somebody, even if you don't want to call a credit counseling agency.
Okay. All right, guys. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before hiring, go to bbb.org, check reviews, and for accredited businesses that agree to operate ethically. And see all my podcasted videos, joeknowsbetter.bbbcommunity.org. I'm Joe Ducey with the Better Business Bureau, helping businesses and consumers get it right.